Yes.
Michelle.
What are the parameters to open up one of the special weather hubs? The reason why I ask is because I'm concerned about the number of people outside, and I know like some people say 32 degrees, some go like 15 degrees, and I wouldn't want to be outside if it was 50 degrees.
Right.
So I guess I just wonder, are we going to try to set up almost like the navigation centers across the state to address the need during the whole winter season?
So it's a two-part question, I would say.
Sure.
The first part, there is a working document between Rhode Island Department of Health, Rhode Island Emergency Management Agency, Housing, EOHSS, right? And I think there's one more, RIDO, Rhode Island Department of Health. So what happens is, and Tom will tell you, he's the Deputy Director of FEMA, we get reports all the time on weather, whether there's going to be any extreme weather. We analyze that with the National Weather Service. We have a direct line with them out of the division out of Taunton office. And what we'll do is we'll get together with the Department of Health, find out if we feel that there's a situation where people might be at harm. Then we get a hold of the Department of Housing, we'll have a conference call, and that's when we'll kind of work it out. Now, exactly what you just said, there's been discussion on possibly lowering the threshold as far as activation goes, and I know Secretary Goddard had just reached out to me recently. She wanted to comment.
Yeah, I very recently, but I have asked Raina, and we will have a conversation about what that trigger is. Yeah.
The second part, I mentioned something about navigation centers. I'm going to have to say I'm not totally familiar with them. There was some discussion me and you had early on about navigation centers, but I'm not totally familiar with that process yet.
It's an active strategy we're trying to work on.
Yeah, I worked closely in Woonsocket and West Warwick, and I have to say the two communities here, and they're amazing. Woonsocket was led by the city councilwoman who's here today, Valerie Gonzalez, and you know, even when you have a community who really wants to identify locations and do this and make sure people are safe, it's really hard to find space. So I mean, I think West Warwick and Woonsocket have been leading the way in doing this, and Providence has been doing the work with the Armory in the past, and I just feel like, I don't know, there's got to be a way to kind of get these communities to come together because it's cold out there, and even when it's not cold out there, people shouldn't be outside. So I don't know. I know it's a strategy. I just wonder, I'm saying this today, preaching to the choir, because I think that having the directors and the state leaders here around the table might be a way for us to kind of push forward this best practice that they're doing in other places to address the short-term need and then build the housing that's needed to actually house people. Okay. I'm hoping that will, you know, and I know we're the week before Christmas, but I'm hoping we'll see more people around the table to really come together with the collective power and political will to move it forward.
Thank you, Michelle. Any other comments from the commission, the council first? Yes.
I actually have a clarifying question. I think you were saying that navigation centers are best practice. Is that what you were saying?
Well, for the short,
and if so,
not for the
I guess
long
either
term.
way, could
Yeah.
someone define navigation centers for me?
Jim, what I mean.
So that I know what it is that we might be looking to do in the short term or not.
Do you want to do it, Ben? So, I can't.
Sure. I think we're working out that framework and imagining what that could be, right? There's a few different options for a navigation center. You know, so we haven't fully baked this cake yet as we're trying to figure this out and then work with this council to just restart and figure it out. But you know, the basic idea would be somewhere that somebody can go and to navigate housing related or homelessness issues, right? A drop-in center where somebody can connect with emergency services from different departments, connect with whether it's DLT, workforce development stuff, health stuff, obviously housing stuff. That's important to us, and then also, let's be honest, stay warm and not be outside, right? So, and all this stuff is working together, as Secretary Goddard said. You know, even talking about the threshold of activation matters, right? So.
But what we were just introduced to in terms of what people were funded to do, we're talking about funding like places for people to be at night, not navigation centers, is that correct?
No, I think that's the
I apologize, it was
clarifying.
a little
No,
bit late.
that's a clarifying. When we're talking about navigation centers, we're talking about a 24-hour
Thank you.
operation that includes overnight
Okay.
emergency shelter, not just a drop-in day center, but
Thank you.
24 hours. That's
Low barrier,
Okay.
with access to services.
I have one more question, excuse me. So I'm the director of the Office of Healthy Aging, and I hear regularly about increases in unhoused older adults. And I'm curious about whether we know that about accessibility for those places that have been funded. For like physical accessibility can either, in all ways, like, are there only stairs? And I understand that sometimes we balance a roof over one's head over making sure that everything is ideal, but it would be helpful to know that we're funding is really fully accessible to people who might have physical limitations or transit limitations or what have you. Do we know that at this point, or can you come back at another time?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, we want every place to be accessible, but we're also balancing that with, there's an emergency,
Right,
let's
no,
open places
and
up, right?
I get that. So I'm just wondering if you know that.
I'm not sure about, these municipalities have been awarded this, winter hub activation kind of places. Where there's running those, I'm not sure what those places look like.
I think it would just be helpful to know,
We'll
not
get the
necessarily
information.
as
Yeah, we
a,
don't get that.
we wouldn't turn down a roof necessarily, but for people to know where there is availability, and then as we look to expansion, prioritizing spaces that, if we find that nothing is without stairs, then we should ideally prioritize some things that are without stairs for us.
That's a really good point, thank you. Yes.
Jerry Larkin from Health. So, I expect you want different perspectives, and some of them are not necessarily direct, but they're adjacent. And just in considering sort of metrics or thresholds, I guess the thing I would want to be sure is that the metrics are multifactorial. It's not just temperature. It could be, wind and rain and all those things that drive. And then I'd sort of hope that there'd be another pipeline into the decision, which is demand. So, people will, be more. So if it doesn't matter what the conditions are, it should really be who needs it. Is there a population that needs housing that would want to access the housing? And maybe if you open it and no one comes, okay, that's fine. But if you open one hub and it gets quickly filled, or even though it's really nice weather out, that would be, I'm not sure if I'm making myself very clear, but it should be not just because the temperature is X or Y, a hub opens, but rather people are looking for housing for whatever reason right now, and therefore we should be opening up the hubs, sort of taking it from a different perspective.
In an ideal world, we would.
I understand that.
Absolutely. And that is a problem for us, for all of us collectively.
Right.
That we need to solve for. So again, I'm limiting questions right now to the members of the council. We have public comment coming up. Anything else from the council? Yes, Elizabeth.
Thank you. My first question is at the person access level, like sort of continuing with Maria's.
And, can people speak up, because there's between air conditioning and a meeting over
Sure,
there.
yeah, sorry, is this good? Okay, sorry about that. At the person level, how access is envisioned to be managed into these projects. So if I'm a person in one of these communities that is getting funded, how will I, or maybe the outreach worker that I know, be getting me into this program? Is there a step involved? Do I show up at the location? Can you just walk us through how that is planned?
So the current process is if we have what'll happen is we'll get that group together. If we really need to open up the winter hubs, what we'll do is we'll get together with the governor's office. We'll work with our PIO, Public Information Officer. We will put out the governor's office puts out a press release. It names the addresses, locations, etc., where they are. Put it on the websites. We push it out through social media. So that's the current platform right now. Now you're saying, so how does that person though get access to it? How does it trickle down to the public? It's kind of that's where you're going. So again, that's our approach right now. We reach out to all the providers too. That's part of the process too. So all the providers that are having, so they've got, hopefully that trickles down to the caseworkers also. But, you know, so it's like anything else, I bet there's always a better way to communicate, because that's always a problem or a challenge.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you for that. So maybe to more information as you have it on the timelines you expect, so like how much notice the community will have when a site is opening, would be helpful so that we can all plan those networks of communication that you just mentioned that are complicated. My other questions around data collection and just what the plan is on how to track how many people are accessing the site and how you plan to do that, and if any performance metrics have been talking about, obviously, you know, so we can just see what works well and what doesn't as we look at the intervention.
So I do know that's built in all our contracts as performance metrics, and I know we're working with, I think your crew is working on a little bit of some processes on that also. We're working together on that.
Yeah, I mean, the nature of these winter hubs that get activated, it's obviously different than our regular shelters, right? So it's not a level of case management, and obviously we want as much data as possible. We're working on the best way to do that, whether it's some sort of spreadsheet that's shared between a group, or it's probably not HMIS, just because the nature of these when they activate. But we are trying to work through that and figure out also with whoever's running these, right, and what their model is, what they submit in an application of how they're going to run it. So we're working through that, but yes, data is super important. We want to know who's accessing these places and what other resources we can make accessible to anybody who is accessing these spots.
So just as it's available, more information on what the measures will be and how it's going to be collected would be helpful. Thank you.
Maria?
Just one follow-up question. Are these first come, first serve locations, or will they tap into some sort of coordinated system, or is it based on, has each municipality set their own standard?
Yeah, it's pretty loose as far as activation. It will not go through coordinated entry. Now, the coordinated entry hotline obviously will be aware of these places as people call in. Hey, here's a spot, but it wouldn't be a referral from coordinated entry to these.
So then just one other point to that, in terms of a communication plan, there would be a secondary piece of it's open and the first piece of it's open and a secondary piece that we're at capacity that we have to get to.
Yes, that's what we did last year, and it worked pretty well.